The Gray Lady's Embrace. Lieutenant Commander David Miller had always found solace in the sea, the vast, indifferent expanse of the ocean, the rhythmic thrum of the ship's engines, the sharp tang of salt in the air. It was a world of order, precision, and unwavering logic. He'd report it to the engineering department, but their diagnostics always came back clean. "Just the old girl showing her age, sir," his chief petty officer Ramesh would always say with a shrug. David, pragmatic, accepted the explanation. Old ships had quirks. Then came the cold spots. Patches of air in the lower decks, particularly in the older, less frequently used compartments like the aft storage holds and the cramped, unused brig that would suddenly drop several degrees, chilling him to the bone, even in the tropical heat of the Arabian Sea. The hairs on his arms would prickle, a sensation that made him glance around nervously. He'd check the ventilation, the watertight doors, all sealed. He blamed localized drafts, a quirk of the ship's aging ventilation system. But an unsettling sense of an unseen presence began to take root, a feeling of being watched, a pervasive cold gaze emanating from the darkened, unused depths of the carrier. The first truly unsettling incident involved his charts. David was meticulous about his navigational charts, always neatly rolled and secured in their designated tubes. One night, after plotting a complex course correction, he left his current working chart unfurled on the chart table. The next morning, he found it subtly rearranged, not crumpled, not damaged, just shifted. The weights holding it down were slightly askew, and a faint, almost imperceptible indentation, like a finger tracing a specific path, was visible near a shoal marker he hadn't noticed before. He dismissed it as the ship's role, perhaps an early morning cleaning crew. But a small seed of unease was planted. He tried to rationalize it, an old ship groaning, the sea playing tricks with his senses. But the feeling of being watched, the persistent chill emanating from the unlit compartments, was harder to dismiss. He found himself unconsciously averting his gaze from particularly dark corners, especially in the long, narrow corridors of the lower decks, as if avoiding an unblinking eye. He started carrying a small, powerful flashlight, not for power outages, but for moments when the shadows seemed too deep, too alive. One night, around 0300 hours, as he was reviewing reports in the operations room, he heard it. A faint, almost subliminal whisper. It was too soft to discern words, but it seemed to emanate from the very bulkheads around him, a sighing, mournful sound, like wind through rigging, but with an underlying cadence that felt strangely human. He froze, listening intently. Nothing. For 15 years, the Indian Navy had been his life, a career forged in the steel of discipline and the unwavering tenets of naval procedure. He'd served on destroyers, frigates, even a stealth submarine, navigating the unpredictable wrath of storms and the calculated risks of covert operations. Just the pervasive hum of the ship's systems and the rhythmic tap of his own fingers on the keyboard. He dismissed it as the ship settling or the wind playing tricks on the old structure. But his sleep grew restless. The anomalies escalated, subtle yet persistent, gnawing at David's rigid logical framework. The flickering lights became more frequent, and now they would occasionally turn off entirely in unoccupied sections of the ship, only to snap back on moments later, and the duration of the cold spots lengthened as if something or someone was lingering. The cold spots intensified, now accompanied by a faint, cloying sweetness like lilies left too long in stagnant water, a scent that would suddenly fill the air before dissipating. It was a smell that spoke of decay and something ancient, out of place amidst the steel and oil. The whispers grew louder, clearer. They were no longer indistinct murmurs. They were voices, direct, personal, calling out fragmented phrases in what sounded like Old English, sometimes even a strange guttural dialect he couldn't place. But the tone was clear, pleading, despairing, sometimes angry, and occasionally a word or two in a chillingly precise, accented tone. Cold, below, lost, find us, sleep with us. He heard a child's soft sob, a woman's desperate plea, a man's guttural gasp, always seeming to emanate from the depths of the ship, echoing through the ventilation shafts, seeping through the steel decks. He'd pause his work, straining his ears, but they would always fade, replaced by the omnipresent hum of the ship. He started seeing fleeting shadow figures in the corners of his vision, coalescing for a split second into familiar forms: a small child, a grieving woman, an old man in a naval uniform, before dissolving back into the darkness. His own reflection in the polished brass of a bulkhead seemed to distort, his features twisting into a fleeting grimace, a look of utter despair before normalizing. It was preying on his mind, twisting his thoughts, trying to isolate him further. He prided himself on his unflappable demeanor, his ability to dissect complex problems, and his unwavering belief in the tangible. Ghost stories were for landlubbers and greenhorns. The only spirits on a ship were those found in a bottle after a long deployment. He was wrong. He developed a slight tremor in his hands, barely noticeable but present. He stopped eating properly, stopped sleeping soundly. His logical mind, his anchor, was slipping. He found himself muttering arguments against an unseen presence, then immediately regretting it, retreating further into himself. His colleagues, the few he interacted with during the brief overlap of shifts, noticed his gauntness, the dark circles under his eyes. They attributed it to the relentless pace of operations, offered sympathetic nods. No one would believe him. He was truly alone. The entity, whatever it was, knew. It was nurturing his despair, cultivating his isolation. He dug through classified naval archives, old war records. The ship had a long, storied past, but tucked away in the forgotten logbooks of her early British service as HMS Hercules, he found chilling entries. During a particularly brutal North Atlantic convoy in 1943, she had taken a direct hit from a German U-boat. The damage had been extensive, but more tragically, an entire section of her crew quarters, along with a makeshift medical base set up for civilian refugees being transported, had been vaporized. No survivors were recovered. The official report stated all hands lost at sea, but subsequent, highly classified addendums hinted at an anomaly, unexplained power fluctuations, equipment failures, and unaccounted for crew manifests during later voyages. Whispers circulated among the oldest naval officers about the Gray Lady, a spectral presence said to haunt the lower decks, still seeking her lost. A chill ran down David's spine. The children's sobs, the women's pleas, the cold spots, the scent of lilies and decay, it was all converging. He looked at the dark, silent corridors of the lower decks, knowing that beneath the steel, something was waiting. He felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to explore the abandoned compartments, to confront whatever lay beneath, to force it to reveal itself. He felt a desperate need to understand. One particularly calm night at sea, the ship's auxiliary power system suffered a complete failure, plunging the lower decks into absolute darkness. The hum of the ship's main engine seemed distant, muted. His current posting was aboard the INS Vikrant, formerly HMS Hercules, an aircraft carrier that had seen more than half a century of service across two navies. The air grew thick with the cloying sweetness. The scent of lilies and damp earth intensified, almost suffocating. The whispers in the operations room became a cacophony, a swirling vortex of voices, all of them his, all his anxieties, all his doubts, all the faces he'd lost. And then, from the depths of the hum, a clear, distinct sound, a child's laugh, playful, innocent, yet utterly chilling, followed by that guttural chuckle, now louder, more confident. He stood frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt the cold spots swirling around him, coalescing, forming indistinct shapes that pressed in on him from every side. And then, slowly, deliberately, he heard the faint, rhythmic thump, thump, thump of footsteps on the steel deck below, drawing closer, approaching the access hatch to the deepest, most isolated section of the ship, the damaged holds from the 1943 attack, long since sealed off. He grabbed his tactical flashlight, its beam cutting a trembling arc through the oppressive gloom. He had to know. He had to face it. He descended the ladder, past successive decks, the air growing colder, heavier, the cloying scent almost unbearable. The whispers grew louder, a chorus now, speaking in a multitude of languages, all pleading, all despairing. He reached the lowest accessible deck, the entrance to the sealed section. It was a heavy, rusted, watertight door secured with massive, ancient bolts, but it wasn't fully closed. A sliver of absolute darkness, colder than anything he had ever felt, bled from the crack. He pushed against the door. It groaned open with a chilling metallic scrape, revealing a vast, cavernous space beyond. A faint, unearthly blue light emanated from within, illuminating the hold in an ethereal glow. David stumbled backward, gasping, but his eyes were drawn, transfixed to the opening. The compartment was a wreck. Twisted metal, hanging cables, and pools of stagnant water gleamed in the eerie light. But it wasn't empty. Hundreds of faint, shimmering forms drifted silently in the stagnant air. They were transparent, barely visible but unmistakable. Men in old naval uniforms, women in tattered civilian clothes, small children, their outlines wavering like smoke. They floated aimlessly, their faces blank, their eyes like twin voids. Though modernized and refitted countless times, parts of her still carried the scars of her past. The faint smell of old oil and brine, the occasional creak of aged bulkheads, the labyrinthine lower decks that still retained their original bewildering layout. And then, in the very center of the vast space, bathed in the unearthly blue light, a shimmering distortion like heat haze forming a vague, bipedal figure, impossibly tall, impossibly thin, its limbs too long, its head too small, its skin seemed to ripple like water under moonlight. And its face, it was a shifting mosaic of shadows and light, features coalescing and dissolving, but he saw the eyes. Not eyes, but two swirling vortices of darkest black, reflecting the dim glow of the scene with an unnatural, hungry gleam. This was the Gray Lady. Not a ghost, but something far more ancient, something that fed on the echoes of pain, on fear, on the fractured souls of the lost. It was the collective anguish of all those lost souls, trapped and assimilated, forming a singular, hungry entity. The creature reached out, its impossibly long, slender fingers hovering over one of the ethereal figures of a small child drifting nearby. It didn't touch, it merely beckoned. The voices in David's mind coalesced, a chorus now, 1,000 alien thoughts, 1,000,000 human fears, all merging, all vying for dominance. They wanted to rest. We offered peace, understanding, freedom. Join us, David, rest, forever. He watched in horror as the creature in the hold seemed to inhale a subtle sucking motion. The ethereal figure of the child wavered, its outline shimmering, before it slowly, inexorably began to drift towards the creature, its form becoming translucent, merging with the swirling darkness of the void where its mouth should be. It didn't struggle. It simply dissolved, a look of placid resignation on its face. Then, another figure, an old woman, then a man, all drawn into the shimmering void. The hold was a silent maw, consuming them. The blue light from the creature pulsed, then intensified, becoming a blinding, invasive blue that seemed to burrow into David's very being. He felt cold, so cold. And then a tearing sensation, not physical but profound, as if something was being gently, meticulously peeled from his core. He heard his own scream, distant, muffled, then fading into the terrifying alien hum. He woke up slumped against the bulkhead, the emergency lights still casting a dim red glow. The hum of the ship's systems was back. The main engines thrummed. The air was frigid, too frigid. She was a grand old lady, a legend in her own right. But stories, whispered in hushed tones among the crew, clung to her like barnacles. Tales of inexplicable cold spots, phantom footsteps, and equipment malfunctions that defied explanation. But the silence, it was deeper than before, more profound. The watertight door to the sealed hold was closed. The ancient bolts rusted shut as if it had never been opened. He pushed himself up, his body aching, his mind a shattered mess. The ship was normal. Too normal. He checked his watch. 0600. He had somehow survived the night. He scrambled to his feet, made his way to the ladder, and ascended to the operations room. His colleagues were arriving for the morning shift, their faces bright, oblivious. He finished his tour of duty. He completed his deployment. He received an honorable discharge, citing stress-induced health concerns. He left the Navy. He lives in a small apartment now, in a bustling city, far from the sea, far from any profound silence. He avoids enclosed spaces, especially those that are too dark, too still. He avoids old buildings, particularly those with too many unlit floors. He avoids silence. He leaves the television on always, a low hum of white noise to drown out the others. He checks his reflection endlessly, scrutinizing his own face, half expecting it to distort, to show the void. He refuses to go near large bodies of water. He tells himself it was PTSD, hallucinations, the exhaustion of command, the burdens of war finally catching up to him. He repeats it like a mantra, a fragile shield against the terrifying truth. He clings to logic, to reason, but the shield is riddled with holes. From that day, he still remains thinking about it. He feels the faint, inexplicable cold spots even in the warmth of summer. He sometimes catches the cloying, sweet scent of lilies in damp earth on a breeze or in the stillness of the night. He hears faint whispers, just on the edge of hearing, calling his name, promising him oblivion, echoing the ancient voices, the cries of the lost. He scrutinizes the faces of strangers, the expressions of friends, looking for that subtle distortion, that unnatural stillness in their eyes, that hint of ancient knowledge. He knows it's still there. In the depths of the INS Vikrant, slumbering, waiting, and he knows with a horrifying certainty that it carried a piece of him with it, a resonance that was forever altered, forever open to its cold, unblinking gaze. He escaped the ship, but he did not escape the entity. He is safe, for now, but he is not whole. He is forever haunted by the chilling knowledge that beneath the familiar veneer of our world, ancient, hungry things lie dormant, or perhaps actively pursue, waiting for the curious, waiting for the isolated, waiting for the fear, forever ensuring that some absences, once experienced, can never truly be filled. David, pragmatic as ever, attributed them to the ship's age, the constant stress of naval operations, and the power of suggestion among bored sailors. The first hint of something amiss wasn't a grand, terrifying spectacle, but a subtle shift in the everyday. It began with the lights. And he will always wonder what stories it now whispers from the silent holds, what souls it now assimilates, and if, one day, the Gray Lady will sail into his dreams, inviting him to join the lost forever at sea. It started subtly, as these things always do, like a barely perceptible tremor in the familiar melody of the ship's routine. David, as the operations officer, was often on the bridge during the early morning hours, overseeing navigation and communications. The ship's internal lighting, usually a steady fluorescent glow, would occasionally flicker, not a power outage, just a momentary dip, barely a second, but enough to make the console screen stutter, the overhead lamps briefly dim before normalizing. Thanks for watching. The veil between our world and theirs is thinner than you think. Each like, each share, each subscription strengthens the connection. Feed the channel before it feeds on you.